I was there for the live interview, but I know I'll watch it over and over. It was that valuable. Wow, you're going to enjoy this one, and it's starting right now. JJ, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here, finally.
Yes, finally. Thank you for helping us. So tell everyone what you do, and it's a lot.
So I run two different types of businesses, and it started out consumer-wise. Like I started out with this vision of wanting to help 1 million people get healthy. And so from that, I built a personal brand in the health space that really works around weight regain and what can get in the way of you losing weight or cause you to gain weight. From that, I have New York Times best-selling books, products, programs.
What's the name of that company?
That company is named me. It's JJ Virgin and Associates. I recently sold that. So I have my JJ VIP company that does all the spokesperson works and the books and the programs, and the product company got sold. But what's interesting about that was I always wanted to help this 1 million people get healthy. And I was on Dr. Phil, and I was on Dr. Phil every week for 2 years. So I crossed that one off the list, right? Because his audience was 13 million plus. So what do you do when you hit that goal? I thought, all right, how do I help 1 billion people?
Yes.
Meanwhile, what was happening were all of these other healthcare professionals were saying, well, how did you do that? And I knew that I could teach it, that it wasn't something that I was so special, that there were predictable steps that I took, that I could teach anyone else how to build a personal brand and then create multiple streams of income. So I started, and I didn't actually mean to start it. What happened first was I wanted to get some friends together so that we could share our best practices and support each other. What happened was over the course of 11 years, it became another business called Mindshare Collaborative, and it is now the premier group of healthcare professionals out there. And what's super cool, it's all about a rising tide lifts all boats. So it is, how can we all get together and help each other and support each other, which in medicine is the opposite of what they typically do. Because in medicine, normally a patient goes and gets a first opinion. If they don't like the opinion, they go to another one to get a second opinion to prove the first opinion wrong. So doctors are used to competing, not collaborating. So I had to flip that whole concept. And then I started another one, kind of the same situation. I didn't really plan on doing it, but a girlfriend of mine, Cynthia Garcia, and I were like, where are all the female founders? Where are the female leaders? How can we get together and support each other? Because we would go to all of these different groups, and it would be like 100 guys and two women in the room, right? And we're like, where are all the women? So, and you know, those groups are awesome and you learn a lot, but women approach business so much differently than men. And we wanted to go to a place where we could share our great ideas and also get pampered, have fun, be creative, you know, make it more of a women's type of event than the dudes hanging out at the bar.
How do women do business differently than men? You said that women do business differently.
Yes.
How?
Well, we're wired differently. I think what's really celebrated in business is the exact worst thing a woman can do, which is put yourself last, work like a fiend, you know, go under a lot of stress to be successful. If you really look at how you're going to be successful, it's not more doing, it's actually more being. It's getting more in touch with yourself. It's putting your self-care first. It's really embracing the feminine part of you, that if you start to hang out with a lot of men, you lose. And all of a sudden you're like one of them. You know, I love the line that Alison Armstrong says. She says, you know, men are not hairy women. Like, we're different. And I think if we start to lose our femininity in business, like, we're losing what's the most powerful part of us, right? So when we get together, women need more time. They need space. They need puttering time. They need creativity. They need all of those things. And they need female friendships. I think we are much more tribal than men are. Like, you know, we're used to being around and taking care of the family and doing all these things. Men go out and get the hunt and come back in and bring it in. So, you know, I'm going back, let's say 10, 20, 30,000 years ago. But if you didn't have your female group around you, if you got kicked out of the tribe, you were done, right? You needed the village. So this is where I've made the most success in my business, is getting together with women and supporting each other. Plus, it's lonely out there otherwise, let's be honest. It's lonely. And I mean, you shouldn't hate the life you're creating when you're building a business.
Something I think you're quite gifted at is creating community. When you do something, you invite all your girls.
Yes.
And everyone wants to be a part of it. And tell me more about that, because I think it's innate in us to want to share and to want to include our friends. And as you said, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
Tell me about that.
There's two things I love to do more than anything else. Number one, I love putting on parties. And I have my mom reminding me about this. She goes, you were putting on parties from like the time you were a little girl. Like I loved putting on parties and I loved getting groups together. And I love the challenges and dynamics that come with the group, in that that's not something for everybody. Like leading a group is not it's not what people think. It's actually a whole lot of politics and dealing with different egos and personalities, and this one doesn't like that one, and teaching people how to create a safe space where all sorts of different people and personalities can get along. It doesn't mean everyone has to love each other, but they have to respect each other, and they have to create a safe space.
We were talking before about the vision of a woman at home not knowing what to do, not even knowing it's possible. And I think that's what the tribe of women does. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. Show women who don't have a network of powerful, strong, supportive, entrepreneurial friends.
Yes, here's two things I can share with you that so exemplify this. So first off, I don't know how to have a job. I've had one real job in my life, and I got fired in literally 3 weeks. No, 3 months, 3 months. But I was told, to stop having all those ideas, to just follow the system, and I'm like, so I got fired literally the week before Christmas, and I was the sole financial support of my family with little kids. Had to be entrepreneurial. So when I was 30, I had this mentor, and I'd met her in my 20s. And what was crazy in my 20s, I'd moved to Fort Lauderdale, and I was in grad school. I was at University of Miami, and I had these clients, and she was one of my clients. And she was a self-made multimillionaire, and she'd done it through Nu Skin. And I didn't know anything about that. For some, I was like, I don't want to know anything about that. I just thought she was super cool. And she was a client. And we'd walk on the beach together, and I'd take her on these beach walks, and she goes, so what are you going to do when you graduate? She goes, first of all, she goes, why are you in school? And I go, oh, I want to be more successful. I want to help more people. Kind of like, duh, come on, lady, right?
Yeah.
And she goes, well, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I go, well, I'm going to get my PhD. She goes, why? And I go, because I want to be more successful. I want to help more people. Now, here's what's ridiculous about this. This woman grew up in a trailer park in Kansas. She has a high school education. She's a self-made multimillionaire, and she is helping millions of people. Talk about someone who can teach people how to create successful, duplicatable businesses. She's changed so many people's lives. I remember one story she had of a housekeeper who she taught how to do this business, who became a multimillionaire, right? So I'm sitting here telling her, you have to go to school, right? She goes, and then she said something about making more money, and I go, this is not about money. Because, in your 20s, when you have no one to support but yourself, it's money.
It's ideals.
That's beneath me. Right? She goes, at 30, you're going to care about money. She totally future-paced me. At 30, she sent me a Nu Skin videotape. It was probably a VHS or a beta or whatever the heck it was, but I remember watching it. I still remember this videotape because it had a little clock and had people rushing, and it talked about trading time for money. And I'd been so frustrated. I couldn't figure out, how do I get out of this rat race? Because I was working, trading time for money as a personal trainer and nutritionist, and the only thing I could figure out was I had a couple personal trainers working for me, and I was speaking so I could make more, but I was just stuck. She sends me that, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I do the logical next thing. I sell my business, I drop out of my PhD program, I sell all my stuff, and I drive to Florida from California where I was, and I move in with her.
Wow.
And I think she was probably like, what are you doing here? And I go, I want to learn. And literally she goes, I will teach you how to do this business. I'm going to teach you business. So here I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. Light bulb moment. I move in, and the first thing that she does is she puts rubber bands around my wrist. It's just almost like this. And she goes, every time you have a limiting belief, anything negative. She goes, what I want you to is snap this. And I'm thinking to myself, I just sold my business. Like, I just sold my business. I just gave up everything. I just dropped out of a PhD program, and this lunatic woman is telling me to cancel, right? I'm thinking, but I'm here, so I'm in. And I was like, okay, this will be like a week. Then we'll move on to the more important things. About a month into all of this mindset training, first off, I come to find out that the way she became successful in Nu Skin was she was the #1 mindset trainer, kind of in the whole network marketing space, and that she had planned to bring me in to become her protege. And that when I was like, all right, when am I going to learn like business strategy? She goes, not ready yet. Total Mr. Miyagi, like total Karate Kid thing. And it took 6 months before I ever got into any of the business piece of it. And I will tell you those 6 months that she trained me in mindset have changed the entire trajectory of my life, of my children's life, everything. In fact, the reason that my son, who went through that very severe accident, the reason people are like, how did you know to think this way? I go, and at the time I didn't remember it. But when you get put into you what is possible, that there are no limitations, it's only the limitations in your mind, right?
Tell us about that.
I mean,
go back to step one.
All that stuff that we think of, because like I was raised in a very traditional family. Mom didn't work because my dad said that all of her money would get swallowed up by taxes. So my mom, who graduated magna cum laude from Cal Berkeley, when my dad had an AA degree, did not work. And my dad worked. So this is what I saw growing up, was a homemaker. And I honestly thought, man, whatever I do, I don't want to do this. Like, I love my mom, but this was the anti-role model. But I didn't have any role models. This was really the first real role model I had, was Kay Smith. This woman who literally said, you know, grew up poor in a trailer park, single mom, mortgaged her car to start her first, like got a little loan on her car to start her first business in insurance. And at the time, she had some insurance broker who trained her on how to sell insurance, and she wanted to meet the whole team. He goes, you're not ready yet. And he said, just go out, you have to sell 10 policies a day, and when you're done, you're done for the day. Well, she wanted to be back with her baby, so she'd go out and sell the 10 policies in the morning and go back and play with the kid. And finally, after a month of this, she's like, when am I going to meet the rest of the group? And he goes, okay, now you can. So she brings in donuts, she goes to meet them, and she says, okay, the guy says, okay, everyone go around the room and let's talk about how many policies you sold this last month. And I realized she sold 10 a day. So for 20 days, she'd sold 10 a day. That was what she did, because that's what he told her to do, so that's what she did. 200. And like one person say, oh, you know, it's been a really rough month. Next person like, well, I sold 5. And she's like going, what is going on here? But she didn't know that what she was doing was unusual. She said, that's just what you do. And so, you know, what she taught me, you get what you expect. So if you get what you expect, why not expect amazing? Like, why expect this when you could expect this? That the only limitations are the limitations in your mind. Now, as you know, I had a son that the doctors told me to let die. And all I could think of was, all right, well, wait a minute, he's still alive. So as long as he's alive, I still have chances, right? And if the limitations are the limitation in mind, I'm going to expect amazing things. I'm just going to expect more. So this is the whole way that she just taught me to think, is just to be really careful about your environment, be really careful about the people you surround yourself with. We were talking about this earlier. You know, Jim Rohn says that your income's the average of the 5 people you hang out with. It is not just your income. It's your mindset, it's your income, it's your weight, it's your health, it's your happiness. If you hang out with people who are in crappy relationships, you'll be in crappy relationships. If you hang out with people who whine and cry and are victims, there are no victims, only volunteers. You'll be a victim too. So choose wisely, right? Because we can control that. We control what goes in, we control if we listen to the news, or we read positive books. We control if we hang out with whiny people, or we hang out with people who are positive and going places. So just pick all of that and manage your environment very carefully. So that was all of what I got at 30 years old. And so I saw what was possible. Like, she taught me how to do the whole law of attraction and everything they hear about in The Secret, about manifesting. At the time, I was stuck. I remember the first thing I got stuck at was making $10,000 a month. And because when you're trading time for money, that was like stuck. And I thought, gosh, I just $25,000 a month. And it's that horizon, like if I just made $25,000 a month, my life would be perfect and everything would be easy and blah, 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 which of course I had another mentor who was like, it's just more zeros. So the first thing that she taught me to do was like just $25,000 a month, focus on it, plan for it, see it.
Do you write it down?
Yep.
How do you
the whole vision board thing? What is your life going to be like? Mm-hmm. She had us do this exercise where you wrote down she said, okay, there are no limits. Anything you get on that piece of paper you can have. You've got 1 minute, write it all down, right? So I'm writing down, I want a Jaguar and I want a condo in Maui and I want I'm writing, thinking so big. And so I start reading them off. She goes, well, why just one car? And I go, well, it's just me. Wow. And she's like, yeah, but you could have two. And I'm like, oh, I'll take a Mercedes. And then I go in a condo in Maui, and she was like, condo in Maui, why not a house? I go, it's just me. She was like, but you can have a house. You could have but how will I take care of it? You could have a staff. I'm like, oh, I'll have a house. She goes, why just a house? And I'm like, she goes, and what part of the island? I go, Wailea. She goes, well, why not the whole island? And by the time you get through that, you realize, oh, well, wait a minute. What is really going on here? Why do people start out, have exactly the same, right? And some people are able to achieve so much more. What's the difference? Because I would argue it's not a difference in strategy. It's a difference in thinking, right? It's a difference in their mindset. So these are all the things she taught me. I was able to, through what she taught me, get to that $25,000 a month, then get to the $50,000 a month, and almost get to $1 million, and I couldn't break it. I could not break it. I was so stuck, and I was like, what the heck? And I felt so alone, I was just this person, and what am I missing here? And what made all the difference, and this was when my kids were younger, I was going to school while working full time. I was in grad school, virtually. I'd get up at 5 in the morning and I was running a gym, and then I had other clients and I was doing TV. I was doing all of this and I couldn't break that $1 million. I'm like, what is this? And I knew it was here. I knew this wasn't gee, I need another strategy. But I couldn't figure out what the heck it was. And here's what made the difference. I joined a mastermind. And the mastermind I joined, so I went out with my buddy, Dr. Fab Mancini, and he was like, you need to publish, you've got a book, you should publish it. You should talk to Dr. Joe Mercola. I'm like, okay. So I go and sit down at dinner with Dr. Joe Mercola, and he goes, the money is in the list. And I go, where's the list? I'll get one of those. What's a list? And he goes, the list on your website. I'm like, oh, I don't have that box on my website. This was when I was on Dr. Phil for 2 years. I didn't have that little box where it put name and I didn't have that. So this money in the list, well, you got to have the name and email box. So I'm going, oh, he goes, what you need to do is read The 4-Hour Workweek from Tim Ferriss. Have you read that book?
I love that book.
Okay, well, there's a hidden chapter clearly that I have not read, because I read this book. I was started working 80 hours a week. I'm like, it's the anti 4-hour work week. But in that book, he talked about Dan Kennedy, and I'd always loved Dan Kennedy. And so I find Dan Kennedy, but Dan Kennedy is not someone a gal's gonna aspire to. He's got the weird sideburns, and so I'm listening to him, and he's interviewing this gal, Allie Brown. And I'm listening to this woman, and I'm like, I like her. She's like me. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I want to learn more from her. And she had this little thing. She was called the e-zine queen back then. And this is so important because everyone thinks they have to have these beautiful brands and everything perfect. And she had this thing. She was the e-zine queen, had a little crown. And she was selling this how to do an e-zine. It was $297. And it was a big stretch, but I bought it. And I did it. And it worked. It was crazy. Now I had an e-zine. I was getting opt-ins. I was getting emails for the money that was in this email list somewhere. I didn't know where it was, but I was going to be in there. And she's going to have an event. And it was called the Online Business Success Workshop. And so she's having this event, and I'm like, I'm going to it. Not only am I going to go, I'm going to bring a bunch of friends, right? So I get a bunch of girlfriends with me. We all go to this thing. And I'd never been to an event where they pitch things. I didn't know what a mastermind was. I'd listened to Napoleon Hill, but I didn't know these things were going on, right? So here she is, easing queen. I do this. I go to this workshop, and I'm at this online blueprint success workshop, and it is like nothing I've ever seen. It is loaded with women entrepreneurs. I didn't know there were any other ones. I thought I was like the only one. So here I am with all of these women, and now Allie is literally, I'm like, whatever she's offering, I'm doing. Like, I want to be just like her. And she was absolutely my after picture of where I wanted to be, like this successful woman. She had a laptop life. She had everything I wanted. So I was like, okay, whatever she says to do, I'm doing. So she starts to pitch this mastermind. And I'm listening to this thing, and I'm sitting next to these two girls, and she talks about this mastermind, and this mastermind that's the diamond level. And she's only going to take 12 people. And you have to apply, and it's very exclusive. And I'm looking at my friends on either side of me, and I'm like, that's mine. I'm joining that. She'll let me in, you know. And she's talking about, and I'm thinking, how much could this be? Now, granted, I don't have any money, so anything is too much. But I also know that it's not a matter of not being able to afford it. It's being a matter of not affording not to. Like, if you can't afford it, figure out a way, because the only time you're really going to be successful is when you pay for something. Then you pay attention, and when you pay more attention. So I'm listening to this going, I know I can't afford not to, even though they're all looking at me going, you can't afford it. So then she says the price, right? And there's going to be these retreats, and they're going to be in Maui and Florida, and she's going to have these half days with you, and she's going to help you build your business. And I'm like so bought into this thing. I'm like leaning in, and she goes, and it's $100,000.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, no, I did not have this money. I did not have this space on my credit card, did not have it. I went into her little lunch. I was so nervous. I remember being like nervous doing this video, and I'm like going, I do TV. Why am I nervous here? And her accepting me, and I'm like trying to figure out how to give her the money because I don't have it, you know. But that was when I was really working on going online. And joining that mastermind, and then rejoining that one, and then like working with Brendan Burchard and Joe Polish. I mean, it started this whole thing, Dan Sullivan, of where I broke the million, broke the 2 million, broke the 6 million, broke the 9 million, it just went boof, you know? That was a differentiator. And what's been the most fun about it is meeting all these women who are friends to this day, you know, like that. In that group, I met Lisa Sasevich, I met Allie Katz, you know, we all stayed friends from there on out, and I met more and more and more women.
What do you think you learned? Is there one common theme? Is it hanging out with a group where they could expand your belief? What was it? What is the mastermind? What is the secret?
I got it. So talk about funny. So I'm sitting at the first meeting with Allie, and all I want are the strategies. Like, just give me exactly what you did. I'll do that. We're all good. Success leaves clues. And guess what she starts with? Mindset. And I'm like, I got that part. I just need to know how to do this. But sitting around with women, and that year, I was the most improved, because I came from like making nothing online that year to doing $550,000 online that year. And I was so irritated because I hadn't been able to break the million online that year. But I mean, I was most improved. But I watched Lisa Sasevich, who came in at a much higher level, go from 130,000 online to like 3 million online. And I felt like a loser. That was what was so funny. But being around other women who were all working on this together, who would be vulnerable, who'd share the challenges, the frustrations, what was working, what wasn't, and knowing that you had those people to call, and that they then would put you on their stage, and you put them on your stage. Like, we all started helping each other. And I feel like the biggest difference joining that mastermind made was not what I learned, it was who I was hanging out with. And when I raised my hand, it was like everybody in the industry was like, oh, look, like I showed up, like they saw me there, where had I not gone into that, I wouldn't have registered on anyone's screen. But the fact that I was in that group, because everyone was talking about her $100,000 mastermind and the women in it, obviously, right?
And that's why this series is such a great start for women, because they start to hear stories, and they start to identify, hey, I could be like that. Like how you saw Allie.
Yeah.
Women can see you.
That was exactly it.
Yes.
It's like you see someone, you go, wait a minute. And I mean, the key important thing is, like, I didn't have any unique skill sets on that stuff. I was fortunate, like, I came from the acting world, so I have that piece for speaking and video, but like the business stuff, I had nothing. I didn't know anything. I mean, one of the big things I always said was I'd make $10 million by 50. I forgot to say I'll keep it. Right? So I was like, oh, I have to learn the business side now. I'm like, who teaches that? But like all of these things, it wasn't like I woke up one day and someone hit me with the magic stick and said, now you know how to be a CEO. I was like, I didn't have a clue how to build teams, how to do tech, how to do that. But when you're in a group, you can learn it. What I love that Marie Forleo says, everything is figure-outable. Ooh. Everything is figure-outable. If you have that first piece of going, ask the right question. How do I start to make some extra money for my family? It just depends on for who. If you're watching this right now, and maybe you're watching this going, okay, wait a minute, like $1 million, $10 million, I just want to make an extra $5,000 a month would be amazing for what I could do for my family. Maybe I can save for college, I can do vacations, whatever it is. That's the first question is, how do I do that? Now, I will tell you that if you're saying, how do I make an extra 1,000 or 5,000, I'm going to say that's the limitation in your mind. But it's okay, we can start and then build and build and build. My first big mission goal was just to not have to get a job. That was mine. It was like to be able to support myself like out of college and not have to get a job.
So if our first goal is to make an extra $5,000 a month, what do we do? How do we flip it? You said, the rubber band, put something out there, start believing it. How do we do that?
So here's where I think that women struggle the most. And I'm going to take it to health first, but it doesn't matter whether it's health or wealth. When we queried our community, our consumer community a couple years ago, and we said, if you're not where you want to be with your weight and your health, why not? Now, I figured they'd say, oh, I can't give up sugar, or I love my gluten and cheese, or whatever it was going to be. And that wasn't what I heard. What I heard was, I don't feel good enough. I don't feel worthy. Right? So the first place that we really have to start with all of this is knowing that you are good enough, that you are worthy. The actual mechanics of how to do this are the easiest piece of it. But what I find is every step of the way, if you get stuck, it's not a strategy piece. It's a mindset piece. And quite often it's all around that imposter syndrome that we've all heard about. I remember I was at Allie Brown's, and I still remember the room I was standing in Marina Del Rey when someone walked in with an article about imposter syndrome. And everyone was talking about it and going, oh yeah. And I'm like, you guys feel this way? Like, are you kidding me? I thought I was the only person. I didn't know it had a name. I didn't know there was a name of someone. I remember when I was on Dr. Phil for 2 years, I would drive up to the lot at Paramount and wait for them to tell me that, like, I couldn't come in. I'd walk in to the dressing rooms and I was like, is my name going to be on the little thing today? I kept waiting to be found out that I wasn't good enough. Like, who are you to do this? Here's the reframe for that.
Yes.
Right? First of all, one of the things Kay Smith taught me, and she goes, so, you're sitting there, I'm sitting here. If you came over here and sat on my lap, it would be a little uncomfortable, right? And a little weird, but that's okay. So, but after a little bit, you adjust, you're like, oh, okay. You've got a new comfort zone. The important thing here is that when you're comfortable, there's no growth. Mm-hmm. Never one time if I had like a really nice day, everything was perfect, like someone sent me some Jimmy Choos and flowers, and I went, I grew a lot today, I became a better person. No. You grow when it's outside of your comfort zone, when you push out. So you've got to consistently look for ways that you can push outside your comfort zone, which means if you do that, you're going to go, who am I to do this? Like, I'll get invited to go speak on a stage, and I'm like, are they sure they meant me? Like, who am I to talk about this? Bingo, I know I'm in the right place. When you get to a point where you no longer are freaking out about what you're going to do, like, I went and did some TV early this morning, and I'm sitting going, I wrote out the scripts a while ago. I never looked at them again. I didn't prep. And I went, wait a minute. Remember the days when I actually got nervous and did this stuff? I got to push to those things. You got to push to the thing, whether it's in sports, relationships. You've got to push to the places where you go, who am I to be doing this? Like, this is scary. That's good. In fact, Stephen Kotler, when he talks about flow, he says if it's too easy, you're like, If it's too hard, you're like, ugh. But if it's just 4% outside of your comfort zone, you get into the flow and you push it. And every time you do it, one of the things Kay taught me is every time you push outside that comfort zone, it's not like a rubber band. It's like a rope that stretches a little bit and stretches a little bit and stretches a little bit. And all of a sudden, you just get better and better and better. And the things that would faze most people don't even register on your screen, right? If you look at the most successful people, they aren't people who just had it easy. In fact, I've never met one successful person who's had it easy. The more successful they are, generally, the more they've gone through, because really being super successful means you have to be able to handle ridiculous amounts of stress. You have to have the most resilience out there. As Allie said, as we were building business, she goes, listen, you're going to think, if I just get to this, if I get to, 25,000 a month, if I get to 50,000 a month, if I get to 100,000 a month, if I can do 10 million, if I can do it, she goes, it's just more zeros. And every zero is going to come with more issues. And so you've just got to keep increasing that capacity, increasing that resilience so that you can handle those things. And that's all that successful people do. So when you go up against something and it's totally awful and crappy, awesome. It's perfect. Because every time you do, like at this point with the stuff I've gone through in my life, there is very little that you can do to stress me out or freak me out or concern me. And if it's money, money is the easiest challenge to handle. No one's dying, right? That's my litmus test. Is anyone dying here? Then we know we've got an issue. Other stuff, not an issue.
We rarely hear fear is showing you the way. Like, if it's scary,
lean in.
Lean in. JJ, that's huge. Like, sometimes we think, uh-oh, my body's telling me something, stay away. Or I shouldn't be doing this, this is scary. Like, seriously?
Yeah, what if it's, I should be doing this, this is scary. It's, you see the Lululemon bags are the greatest things ever. We should just live by the Lululemon bag. And on the Lululemon bag, it says, do one thing a day that scares you. I will challenge anyone to try to find that, because it's hard to continue to find those things that challenge and scare you.
Okay, let's get practical. Say you write down, I want to make $5,000 more a month. That's really scary. Now what do we do? Turn off that voice, do the rubber band. Mm-hmm. Is that what we do? Step into it?
I think the first thing, so when someone says, and it's funny, it's whether it's making money or losing weight, getting health, it's all the same.
Finding a mate, and all of it.
It's all the same. Yeah, any of those things. So the first thing you've really got to do is go, why? I'm here. I want to be there. You've got the clear gap, I'm here now, I'm making nothing a month, let's say, or $1,000 a month. I want to make $5,000 a month. And I'm going to say, why? What's that going to do for you? Right? Because we've got to get so clear on that why. It's not the how, it's the why. So what's the why? And then future pace yourself. What does your life look like there? I always did this with people when we were starting out with any of the weight loss programs. Okay, here. What's this life look like? And I'll tell you what was crazy, was we would take a picture of their ideal body, put their face on it.
So right? They could see it.
So they could see it, and I'd have them carry it around. What Allie Brown did was she would put us in ridiculously cool locations. She would have her events at Ritz-Carlton's and Four Seasons. She'd go, I want you to hang out there, right? Because this is what I want you to see as your new normal. It's not just raising the ceiling, it's raising the floor, right? Like, I'll never fly Frontier Airlines again. I'm only going to fly, United Economy Plus. And then it's like, I'm not going to fly Economy Plus anymore. Like, you just keep raising the floor along with raising the ceiling. Super important. So the first step of getting to that place, because again, the strategy part can be solved, is really getting clear on why and what's my life going to look like there. And how much of that life could I just start living right now? Because probably a lot of it you actually could. You just don't think you can. And then you can start getting into, okay, what's my unique ability? What are my skill sets? What things would I love? I love the question Mary Morrissey always asks is, what would you love?
Ooh.
Right? What would you love? Well, I've designed businesses. I've owned a business I hated, so we don't need to do that again. I very specifically, freedom is my highest value. And so I was like, what business would I love? One that allows me to work from anywhere. So what are the things that you love so you can design the right business for you?
Amazing. 2 questions. What is next for you? And do you still get scared?
What's next for me is Virgin Diet 2.0. I have one more book with Simon & Schuster, and I really was monkeying around with what I thought that should be, and should it be a business book, and should it be a self-help book, and blah, blah, blah. And then I went, my agent, Celeste Fine, who's amazing, was like, you really need to do Virgin Diet 2.0. And I go, how could I make that fun? What would I love? Because there's some stuff I want to change there, but ultimately, I'm an entrepreneur. I did it once. I'm like, let's do something else, shiny object. So what makes that fun for me is I'm going to do Virgin Diet 2.0, and there's some super cool stuff I'm doing with that. However, the cool thing is I'm going to do a duplicatable blueprint of how to create a movement with a book simultaneously. That makes it super fun, because then I can teach other people how to do the same thing. And I think books are one of the most important things that we can do, because they create a brand like nothing else does. They're very intimate. People read them. They feel like they know you, like they're, they take you into the bathroom, like into the bedroom, like it's a very intimate thing. So that's my next thing.
Teaching others how to not only create your personal brand, but then launch your book.
Yeah. Well, I love teaching personal brand. That's my favorite thing. I have a health business growth roadmap that I'm doing, and the first part of it is landing your brand. So I have a whole process to take anyone through how to build their personal brand. But I think one of the greatest things to use to build your personal brand is a book. Then you can do your TEDx talk, your signature talks, your podcasts, all that stuff right around that. So that's the first piece of it. As far as what is scaring me, what I would tell you is I am doing all sorts of personal development stuff now to get me out there that way. You get to a certain point, and I think for a lot of us, we're very goal-oriented, we're ambitious, we're driven, we make these goals, and then you hit the goal. And you're like, all right, so, and this sounds like, oh, poor her, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. However, when you hit that goal, you're like, well, what should the next goal be? And so I remember when I did the first New York Times, I was like, oh, I'll stay on the list, and then I'll do another one. And I was like, what do I like? And I realized I was just setting goals to set goals, that there was no soul behind them, that it was really more of an ego, look at me. And so my biggest scary thing over the last year that I've been working on, and I'm just going deeper and deeper and deeper on, is like, what is ego and what is soul? Right? And how do you make that shift where you leave ego behind? It's not this ego death. It's like, because that doesn't make sense to me. Your ego is part of you, it protects you. And my ego has gotten me all the way to here. But I know for the real important work I need to do in the world, that it's not going to get me there. Where I really want to go next, one of the things that I want to do with health and healthcare is really be part of the answer in what's going on with diversity and inclusion. I'm horrified by what has gone on in healthcare. It's a horrific situation. And so I'm determined that Mindshare will be part of that. Ditto in women's business, like with our Unicorn Female Leaders group, we are working on just being a leading force for diversification and inclusion in business, and then how we can mentor other women up. I had the most amazing experience, and that continues to push me out of my comfort zone, where I went to a prison. I went to a level 4 correctional facility 3 years ago. And level 4 is where they have, people have done really bad things. Like there's a lot of people who are in there forever and not eligible for parole. And so I went there in an entrepreneurial group to do business coaching, because what they do, what this one gal does, Kat Hoke, who's just one of the most amazing women out there, is she discovered that, a lot of these people in prison are super entrepreneurs. They just put it in the wrong direction. So if we could come in there and coach them, they have something like a 90% recidivism rate. So you leave prison, and I found this out because the guy I've been mentoring, when he leaves, they were going to put him right back where he came from with nothing. So you go right back to where you came from, but you have no skill sets and no money. What do you think is going to happen?
Exactly.
Versus if you go through her process, they have a 90% success rate of not going back. Crazy. When I was in this correctional facility, which scared the crap out of me. First of all, it was funny, we all sign up, and then I'm like, oh, well, I'm too busy. Why am you have to fly to LA, you have to get on a bus at 5 a.m, I'm like, I am too busy for this. So I'm going to bail out. And I get the email like, we know some of you want to bail out. You can't bail out. We've already gone through all this stuff. You need to be here, right? So now I'm stuck. And I'm like, it's like they knew, right? So we're going there. We had to go through all these background checks. We leave at 5 a.m. You get there at 8. It takes us 2 hours to even get into the actual facility. And then you're standing in the facility and they go, so we have a shoot to kill order. And if you hear anything about, get on the ground, don't do it. You stay standing. Those are the prisoners. And just know that, we shoot to kill. So if something goes on, you just stay. And I'm like, wow. Okay, all right. I'll just stay standing over here. So, so we go into this rec center with these inmates, and first of all, like some of them no one comes to visit them. And we walk in and they are so excited. They have these flower leis. They're giving us, the music is going, everyone's high-fiving. We have this amazing experience. And in the middle of the experience, we do something called Step to the Line, where they have one line of the inmates and one line's us. And they say, if something's true to you, step to the line. If it's really true to you, raise your hand. And so it starts with things like, are your parents, did your parents divorce when you were young? If they divorced, were you upset? Did you feel loved? Have you felt like a good parent? Did you ever drive under the influence? It's like, as you start to step to the line, you realize, wow, we're the same. Like the only difference is I'm a white girl. And by the way, when you looked at all these inmates, they were 95% black. And when they started to go through it, some of these people had been taken into jail at 8 years old.
Oh my gosh.
What 8-year-old? Like 8 years old. So we're going through all this stuff, and then they have us partner up to do this forgiveness exercise. And this guy and I lock eyes, and he comes over, and we start talking about forgiveness. He goes, I can't forgive. I'm not going to. He goes, I'm not going to because my mom was a drug addict. My mom was a drug addict. She was on drugs when she was pregnant with me. She brought gang members in the house. I didn't have a chance. And I'm like, and we're talking. I'm explaining my own forgiveness stuff, and he's not having it. And I go, well, would you entertain the possibility of forgiving? He goes, okay. That's as far as I got him. I leave. I send him my book, Miracle Mindset. That talks about forgiveness. It talks my whole story, and I don't think I'm ever going to hear from him because I don't know how I could, hear from him. Turns out he can DM me on Facebook. He goes, I read the book. I forgive my mom.
Oh.
I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, Send him some more books. I send him Think and Grow Rich. I send him The Power of Positive Thinking. I start sending him everything I can think of that I know. For the last 2 years, he has been on a personal development journey like you can't believe. The guy has turned it all around. Like his whole mindset, what he's doing, he's meditating. I'm like, we've been able to talk on the phone. Now we're set up to go back and visit him as soon as the pandemic lets us back in. We're allowed guests. Meanwhile, he introduced me to his cousin. And his cousin was the first woman in the family that ever went to college. No one else has. When I meet her, and I actually was talking to the cousin because he wanted me to help his mom. His mom's going through surgery now that they are, have a relationship again. And I start talking to the cousin who's taking care of the mom. And this woman who went to college, had a job, but because of COVID, they cut her hours down to 30 hours. She has all these family members mooching off her, staying at her house that she's renting, and she can't make rent. So she goes and gets these paycheck loans. Have you ever heard of these paycheck loans? These should be criminal. Interest rates are like crazy. This should be totally, so I'm talking to her. She's like, hey, I really want to learn how to, I've been studying real estate. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. I'm like, hey, I'd love to support and help you on how to do that stuff. Then she starts to tell me the story, and I go, we got to fix this.
Yeah.
So I go, listen, I will help you. We're going to get out of this. You got to get rid of the moochers. So she got rid of all these people who were mooching off of her. We got her out of the payroll loans. I got a friend of mine to hire her for another job. And then I sent her to Dream Builder Live with Mary Morrissey. Mm-hmm. And she has turned everything around. Like now she's donating to Unstoppable Foundation that helps bring clean water to Africa. She is putting money into savings and investing, and she's setting herself up to have her own business. Those are the types of things that I want to do. Like this is the type of stuff where you make that difference and you don't even realize it, but like you help lift one person up, you can change generations. And you don't have to ever even like just quietly over here, And
send a few books, how it started. You send a few books.
Yep. Send a few books, coach a little bit, and then it just starts to ripple. And the ego side will go, oh, look at me. But the soul side just knows that this is just the path. And that I think the next path really is so much less. It's like where I can be a guide. And then these people will all start to step up. And they'll be the ones that are the role model that will really make the differences in all of their different communities. So that is really what's super exciting.
Huge, such service, but you can see what happens when you help one person.
Yeah.
Like you helped now families.
Yeah, it's really cool.
The millionaire within her, what does that make you think of?
It's funny when I look at money, because obviously when people hear of millionaire, they would think money, but for me, money is purely energy, so it's not money at all. When I think of that, I really think of what did money allow me to do? Because I remember sitting in Allie's mastermind, and one of the girls had become a multimillionaire while in the mastermind, while I was still like, but she said, money has just made me more of who I am. It's like, it's not going to change you. If you're a crappy person, you'll be a crappy person with money, showing off all your cars and houses and all that crap. If you are a servant person, you'll go, okay, now what can I do? I mean, I think for me that the millionaire within has a couple different important pieces to it. But the biggest important piece of it is, now that you have this, what are you going to do with it? Because more shoes doesn't change anything, it's at first when you start to make money, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get shoes. But that gets old in about a minute. And then you're like, what can I do? What other Deannas and Vernells are there out there? How else can I serve? And how else can I transfer this mindset of possibility to them? Because you just do realize that it's literally just a mindset shift. That's all it is. And for so many of these people, they just never saw what was possible. They didn't know it was an option.
Perfect. You're so inspiring. I can't wait to see everything you do and how many lives you change. Thank you so much for your time. It's been such an awesome pleasure.
Thank you.
I got so much out of this interview, and this is the one I'm watching over and over again. There's so much to learn here. I hope you got as much as I did.